Hi, Jess.
Hi, Tony.
So, first off, we'll talk about your book.
Okay.
I've read it, Kiddoed. For everybody who doesn't know, could you tell them a little bit what it's about?
Sure. Kiddoed is, I made up the word for people who had lost children because there are widows, there are orphans, you know, everybody knows what that means. But there's no word for people who have lost children. And I felt like we needed a word. So I made up the word kiddoed for people whose children have died or child has died. And I wrote this book 10 years ago while my daughter was alive. I had 2 children that died very early in life of a terrible genetic illness called epidermolysis bullosa. It's a skin disease where with any sort of mechanical friction, like dragging your finger across their skin even, their skin blisters, the 2 layers of the skin separate, which causes a blister, the dermis and the epidermis. And then when the blister pops, there's a large open sore there. So it's the form that my children had, the subtype is called junctional Hurlitz, and it's universally fatal. So they had no chance of surviving. And with my daughter, she was my second child with EB, so I knew it. And writing was how I coped. Journaling was how it got me through. And so this book is my journal while she was alive and then afterward for a few months.
And how many children do you have now?
I've had 5 children. Ethan and Kaylee were my first 2. They died when they were little. Ethan at 7 months and Kaylee at 3 months. And my living children are Lily, 8, Jackson and Henry, 4.
Now, for people who don't know how EB worked, how come Ethan and Kaylee had EB and your daughter Lily and sons
don't? EB is an autosomal recessive trait, which means that you need 2 carriers to match up in just the right way in order to get a child with this disease. And even when you have 2 carriers, there is only a 25% chance with each pregnancy that that child will have EB. I just had very bad luck twice. So there's a 75% chance even with the genes that matched up that we would have a normal baby, which is why I didn't abort my second fetus, my daughter, Kaylee, because I was offered an abortion, where in Pennsylvania that doesn't happen. My doctor offered me an abortion because my son had lived a very painful life, suffered a lot, and died. And she said, I will do this for you if you want. And I said no, because I couldn't give up the thought of a normal baby. A 75% chance at a normal baby was something I was not willing to give up. So people say, why did this happen to you and why did it happen twice? Well, there's your reason. The first time we didn't know. It never ran in our family before. We had never seen it before. We'd never heard of it before. And the second time was an accident. It was birth control failure. And I was just hoping for a normal, healthy child.
Now at the end of the book, Kiddoed, you end the book with saying that you're pregnant.
Yes.
Is that Lily?
That is Lily, my oldest living child. She is 8 now. Ethan would be 13. Kaylee would be 10. And she is incredible. She's perfectly healthy. After I named the guy, my first husband, that I had the first 2 kids with, Bobo the sperm guy, in my book, which is where I'll keep him because I don't know that he wants his name on blast, you know, for everybody. But I put in the book because that was the only way to accurately represent his role in my life. Like, he was just my sperm donor. He never fathered the children. He never was a dad. I moved out when I was 8 months pregnant and never went back. the second time when I was 6 months pregnant and never went back. So he visited with Ethan every once in a while, but that was it. But then I divorced him, and I started a new life with my second husband, who I called Mr. Wonderful in the first book, and I shortened it to W, or W, like George W. Bush, because he reminds me of George W. Bush because he's so stupid. Isn't that terrible? So I didn't, that's why I don't say their names, because I'm not very kind to them. And I've noticed in my writing, I'm very real and raw and open. And a lot of the time, it's not very nice. You know, I filter a lot when I talk to people and stuff like that. But when I write, it's straight from my soul. So there's judgments, and there's, you know, nastiness sometimes. And there's a lot of cynicism and snarkiness and sarcasm and stuff like that. But people can really identify with that. That's real to people. I mean, that's reality. Everybody has those feelings, and everybody wants to say them out loud, but they don't. So that's why the book did well with its audience.
Now you have other books as well that you're going to release?
I do. I have kiddoed at a publisher right now. I self-published it a few years ago in 2012. And it did fairly well. It did okay, you know, but it wasn't like I could make a living off of it. So I decided to submit it to an actual publisher. And it's hard these days. You have to be famous first and then write a book in order for publishers to come after you. And there's not a lot of publishers that take on solicited manuscripts. So I finally found one, and they've been doing it for about 20 years, and they are a family-owned, you know, small publishing company, and I have my fingers crossed. And my next two, if that one does well, if they publish it, I have my next two books written. They're not edited yet, and they're not ready to release, but that could be done in a short period of time. The second one is called Walking the Mile, and it's about me walking in a lot of different shoes, a lot of other, you know, characters' shoes. Like, I was a drug addict for a time. I was a mother, I was a single mother, I was a teacher, I was a prostitute, I was many, many, many things. And it's about me finding myself, you know, and fleshing out like who I am as a person, who I wanted to be. And then the third book is called Centered, and it's when I was remanded to the Potter County Women's Center, Potter County Women's Recovery Center in Harrison Valley, Pennsylvania, when I got bad into drugs, when my children were taken away from me. And I didn't know how to cope. So I started doing drugs, and I was on probation at the time for a fight with my neighbor, and I got sent to jail for a year. And so it's called Centered because I was literally centered. I was remanded to the center, but also I found my center. It was a year to focus on me, which I'd never had before. And it was really a blessing in disguise. I never thought that it would go that way. And I'm really grateful for it now. Not that I would choose to do it again.
What are one of the things that you did learn at the center? Your relationship with God?
I really struggled with my spirituality a lot. I was mad at God. On the first page of my book, Kiddoed, my first book, it says, I don't know what I'll name this. My grief therapist said I should name this, or I should make a journal. One for all the good thoughts and one for all the bad thoughts. This will be the bad one. And I say, I don't know what I'll name it. Maybe I'll name it, fuck you, and other things I'd like to say to God. Like, that's how I felt. I felt like God had deceived me. He'd betrayed me. He was a mean kid with a magnifying glass, and I was the ant, you know? And nothing had ever gone right in my life. I was sexually abused as a child. I had a terrible mother. I, had tried so hard to make my life something. I got to this high point in my life where at 23, I was an instructor at the Vet Tech Institute in Pittsburgh, where I was teaching at a college level for classes of, 40, 50 students at a time, and having them graduate and pass the state board exam, which was like, yay, pat on the back. And I was real proud of myself. And then Ethan was born, and then he died. And it was like all of it was taken away from me because my mental health couldn't handle it. I didn't know what to do, and I wasn't sure that I would survive it. And so I was like floating along aimlessly for a long time. And I'm not sorry for it because that's where my other 3 children came from. But man, I wish it could have been condensed into like 2 years instead of 13 years. But I mean, all in God's time. This is what I'm learning. When I got out of the center, people told me, fake it till you make it. And at first I was mad about that. Like, what? That doesn't make any sense. Like, God knows I'm faking it if I pray and I don't mean it or whatever. But they said, pray anyway. Your feelings will come. And they did. It was like a miracle. And I didn't believe them, and I didn't believe all the way in God. And then when I got out, I had this day that was incredibly sad. I went to see my children at the park, and I was sobbing when they left, walking home. And I started talking to God, and I talked to God the whole way home. And I was walking very slow, so it took like half an hour, 40 minutes or something for me to get home. And then I came home, and my friend Ken, who is an ordained minister, started talking to me. And my friend Tori was like, it's time for her to be baptized, I think. And I was like, oh, what a great idea, So we went, and I was baptized in the Allegheny River, and it was life-changing for me. I talk to God every day now. I'm not mad. I forgive him because I know he forgives me for all of my sins, for everything I've done wrong. And that's amazing to me because some of the things that I've done, I can't even forgive myself for. I had an abortion once, which is one of the things that I don't know that I'll ever be able to like rectify that with myself. But I was an addict. I was an alcoholic. I was in a terrible place. I couldn't be a mother. And I would be doing harm to the baby too. So I had an abortion, and that God forgives me for that is something so profound, something so incredible, that I feel like I have to be able to turn around and say, what faithful people say. They say, in the good times you thank God, and in the bad times, God walks beside you. Jesus walks beside you. God carries you, and you are held, and you're better for it, and you're stronger when you come out the other side. And I never knew that. People always called me strong and brave, but what I felt inside was scared and small. And I felt like I was being punished, for something that I had done or who I was or whatever. But that all changed in the past year, and I'm really grateful for that too.
And what things do you see in your future now?
I'm really hopeful. I'm really, really hopeful. In my future, I hope to get the Whoah network up off the ground and have people be able to be inspired and uplifted by it. I want to have people's interviews on there who have overcome adversity, who have had really tragic, awful things happen to them and have come out the other side stronger and more graceful and, you know, loving God and things like that. I want more of my story to be out there because I know it is. And I know that that inspires people and it changes lives. I saw this man while I was in the center who has no arms and no legs. His name is Nick. I can't pronounce his last name, but it's like Vujicic, Vujicic or something. And he talks to people about Jesus. And he tried to commit suicide when he was 10. I mean, he had obviously didn't have an easy life. He has no arms and no legs, you know. I mean, the way that he spoke to me was incredible for me. It was profound, and it made me believe that people can change other people's lives. And that's what I want to do in the future. And I want to also pay people for doing what they love. Because a lot of the time, artists have jobs they hate because that's what pays the bills. And I feel like people should be able to get paid for doing what they love to do. And that's what I hope to do more with on this network too. Sign people for things like singing or drawing or painting or dancing or making music or whatever is their talent, because these are the things that people are passionate about, not, you know, working in a factory for 12 hours at a time so that you can pay your electric bill. I mean, that's ridiculous, and people end up hating their lives. And, you know, I've watched these interviews of people at the end of their lives, and what most of them say they would do differently is work less and enjoy life more. So I want to help people do that.
Thanks, Jess.
You're welcome.
And thanks for being the first interview on the Whoah Network.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure and an honor.